Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. Going down this Saturday in Louisville, Kentucky. Unfortunately, had some things pre-planned this weekend, but I know you're going to get to be in attendance with some of our buddies. So hope it's some good fights, man. A ton of them for you guys to watch. There's 14 of them total on Saturday. Our main event, another middleweight main event. Jared Cannonier taking on Nassourdine Imavov, and then in the co-main, man, return of Dominick Reyes taking on Dustin Jacoby. Excited to get into it. Won't waste too much time since we got a lot of fights to break down. I'll let you recap last week. I know you're on a little bit of a heater right now. Let you talk about how we finished up, and then we'll get into things.
Yeah, so a little bit of a mixed bag of results, but looking over your card, man, your two biggest plays that you had gone on both hit, and it was the stabs that just didn't go your way. It's a game of variance, and I think that as long as you still hit your biggest plays on the night, that's going in the right direction for sure. We look at the two straight bets that you had on the card, Phil Rowe and Jocelyn Edwards. Rowe had a really good fight. That was probably a sweep away from a victory. I was also on Jocelyn Edwards with you, and that one was kind of a stand up from a clash of heads and a spinning back fist away from a victory. I really don't hate either one of those dog shots at all. Nico Price versus Alex Morono under 2.5. That one I think a lot of people fell victim to. Both guys really, really tough. Morono didn't really look like much of himself. I feel bad for the people who had laid the juice on Alex Morono right there. Holland wins inside the distance. That was a great bet. He got tagged early, but I think a lot of people thought that Holland had a significant grappling edge, and he showed it, breaking Oleg Jacek's arm. Let's see, the over 2.5 rounds in Strickland versus Costa. We were just talking about this one. After that first round was over, you saw how the fight was going to go. You knew exactly what Sean was about to do, put on a 25-minute sparring match.
Yep.
You hit that one for 3 units, and then your last one, Jelton Almeida taking on Alexander Romanov. Almeida by decision at plus 400. It was a stab. I think Romanov is just completely there to cash a check. At the first sign of resistance, he's willing to completely quit, and I don't think that his career moving forward will be good at all. He ended up the night only minus 0.46 units in the hole. We'll take a look over at my card. I hit Roman Kopylov at plus money. This line had completely flipped. I thought it was a 50-50 fight, and truthfully, it looked like a 50-50 fight. I think Roman Kopylov should have gotten the nod, so I was happy to get that. But it was very close, and Kopylov looked like he was running out of tools towards the end of it. We talked about the Jocelyn Edwards pick. I was on Sean wins 4-5 decision and Sean wins by decision. I hit that for 2 units. The Makhachev versus Poirier fight-ins by sub, I also hit for 2 units. And, yeah, that one was a sweater for sure. I'm happy that Islam – I mean, that's the thing, though. Islam's just one of those guys where he is strong enough that if he can lock up a submission, the squeeze is so strong that, you've seen Charles Oliveira tap quicker than he ever has. And we see it again here with Dustin Poirier. Morono wins by TKO. I didn't fall for the Morono money line trap. I did think that he was going to be a little bit cleaner striker, but again, I think he's kind of getting to that point in his career where he's accepted journeyman status and maybe struggles to get motivated for these fights. At least that's how it's looking. And then Raposo wins decision only. I didn't get to watch that fight, but I heard there was, some questionable calls mid-fight, some fouls. Is what it is. Ended up the night plus 2.76 units. Like you said, I am on a little bit of a heater, so I'm hoping to keep that going into this one live. And we will start off the night in the women's strawweight division where we see Indian prospect Puja Tomar taking on Brazilian prospect Rayanne Amanda dos Santos. I'm excited for this fight, man. I have Rayanne Amanda in my fantasy league lineup, and I was really hoping to get a decent price tag on her. She opened minus 180, and looking at it now, I probably should have jumped on that, but I was hoping that we would get an even better price tag. She came in lost a split decision, or at least I think it was a split decision. Yeah, split decision to Talita Alencar in a fight that I had bet her in, and I thought that she won. So I thought that she was going to be underrated coming into this fight card, but it looks like people have also caught on. Tomar, she looks decent. I think she's a little bit undersized for the weight class, lacks a well-rounded game, and I think that she's going to be at a significant grappling disadvantage here against Amanda. Not a lot of Indian prospects for whatever reason, that it probably just not getting the best looks in camp. And it's tough for me to want to bank on somebody here, even though Tomar in her regional tape, like she looks like a competent fighter. But I do think that, eventually Rayanne, also well-versed stand-up and grappling, I think that she'll eventually work her way to the ground, where she'll probably take over. And I'm curious to see where the sub prop drops, because the money line has gotten way out of hand. At the end of the day, she's a 115-pound woman that is yet to have a victory in the UFC. And so she's probably not deserving of a minus 350 as much as I want to play her. So Rayanne Amanda's the pick, but probably looking for the sub prop or just a layoff.
Yeah, I was about to bring up I knew you had bet her in that first fight, and super close fight where she arguably, could have got her hand raised. I know you said she opened minus 180, but, man, I'm like 99.9% sure I saw somebody tweet out a picture of her opening on DraftKings at like plus 140. And something like that. Yeah, so I know there's even people that got plus money on out there. And to me, that kind of feels like the UFC felt like they were trying to do their Indian fighter a favor and set her up for what was a winnable fight. And it's kind of backfired in their face, in my opinion,
I don't know. I think that DraftKings might have been a misdrop. If you look at it now, they have it opening at minus 285. They're not even showing the plus money. I think that was kind of a mishap that people jumped on.
Yeah, I thought about like the other Indian fighter, and it was Jubilee, and they let him fight Mike Breeden. So it's like, they kind of are trying to give her a winnable fight, but I'm with you, man. I feel like there's a significant disadvantage on the mat for her. And if Amanda Dos Santos was smart at all, she goes out here, takes this fight to the mat. And I think the sub props equally as live as you do, man. So not too much more to add there. I see that fight pretty similar. Moving up a weight class to men's 135, we got Cody Stamann taking on Taylor Lapilus. And, I was really happy to see you bet Cody Stamann here, because it's a bet that's been staring me in the face all week. I think there's big potential for the line just to be off. When you got a fight that's lined as big as it is, to see the judges, it kind of feels like the value is already on the underdog there. And then you talk about the fact that he could have potential wrestling upside if he were to just, come in here with any type of intelligent game plan. And then the experience at the highest level, man. And when I look at Taylor Lapilus, it's pretty much a one-dimensional French kickboxer. It's like nowhere deserving of a minus 300, minus 350 price tag. His takedown defense, get-up game, it's not terrible, but I do think Cody Stamann is able to push a really, really good pace and will likely ground him a couple times here and isn't lost on the feet. Cody's got pretty good boxing as well. So at plus 220, I think I'm going to end up getting there as well, man. So give me Cody Stamann, first underdog of the night for me.
Yeah, I like it, man. I think that he's going to have a stupid wrestling advantage. Cody Stamann, he's been on a little bit of a roller coaster of a career, especially these last few years. But we're talking about a guy who landed 5 takedowns on Song Yadong. He's landed multiple takedowns in a lot of fights, and he's become a veteran of the UFC who I think can put together a solid game plan, especially when it's only 15 minutes that he has to do it. Mm-hmm. Lapilus will have a pretty significant reach advantage, which I assume that he's going to try and use the entire fight. But Stamann has talked about in the past how he kind of gets in trouble by starting off slow and letting his opponents get ahead of him in fights, and he's trying to put an emphasis on getting this fight started early and not letting Taylor Lapilus settle into it. I watched some interviews with him, and I kind of like the mindset that he's in right now, man. Lapilus hasn't proven much to me. He's had a decent run on the regional scene, and I think he's kind of getting over-credited for wins over Nate Maness and Wilson Reyes, Colin Loughran. All those guys are solid, but have their deficiencies. And I think somebody like Lapilus is just a perfect matchup to kind of expose those holes. Where Cody Stamann, he's been fighting the best of the best. And the only time that he's dropping the ball is when he is fighting the best of the best. And his last time against Douglas Silva de Andrade, that's one where it's, it's a little tricky. I believe he got injured in that fight. I'm not sure if it was during it or if it was after, but injured into that fight, it was a hard-fought decision. And Douglas Silva de Andrade has over 30 fights at a high caliber. And, it's not a loss that I feel like he's on a downward spiral in his career. I think that Lapilus is one of these fights that is a great bounce back spot for somebody who's fought at such a high level like Cody Stamann. And I think he can just get in there, mix it up, make it dirty, grind on him. And he even talked about if he wanted to make this a 15-minute wrestling match, he could. And I think as long as he knows he has that in his back pocket, I'm pretty confident that he's going to be able to edge out these rounds and probably win a decision here, although he's calling for the finish in the second round. So I think if he starts early, he'll get a grindy win right here and hopefully show him that there's levels to this game.
I like it.
So, yes, I have 2.2 units on Stamann at plus 228. And it looks like his line might be climbing, so you might get a better number on it. I'm not really sure what people are seeing in Lapilus, but, happy to double down if it gets insane. Moving down to the women's strawweight, Eduardo Moura taking on Denise Gomes. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I didn't do too much tape on this. I don't know too much about either girl. Denise Gomes, I know that she hits like a freight train. She's been put up against like Angela Hill in her last fight, and that's going to be just a tough time out. That's a veteran of the game who rarely gets wobbled, and that's kind of what Gomes has been relying on since she got into the UFC. We've seen girls as low level as Loma Lookboonmee be able to put a 15-minute decision to beat her. And we've also seen her knock out girls as good as Yasmin Howergy. I have yet to see a full put together game plan, which is why I think that the odds makers are giving her this plus 165. Eduardo Moura, you've just never seen her lose, so it's tough to point out the holes. But I look at the level of competition and, it's super, super low level. Bunny Ruiz being probably your toughest competition. And if you're not finishing Bunny Ruiz, you probably don't deserve to be in the UFC. This is one of those sit back, learn a little bit more about both these fighters. I would, just off of history, I would probably play Denise Gomes at plus money here, but this is going to be a layoff spot for me.
Yeah, I think the only thing keeping me off Denise Gomes here is the takedowns of Eduardo Moura. I think she's a lot more physical of a girl as well, and I feel like she's got a big grappling, big wrestling upside. And when she gets on the mat, she's a pretty dangerous girl historically. She likes her ground and pound. She's able to lock up submissions. But I do feel like that she doesn't have much to offer Denise Gomes on the feet, if I'm just being just honest with you. I don't like her striking. I think she's pretty defensively poor. And if this does get extended late into 2 and 3, I think the underdog is super live here. I just feel like round 1 goes to Eduardo Moura at a pretty high clip when she's fresh and the takedowns are coming easy. So I don't know. I kind of lean Eduardo Moura just because I feel like she might be able to win the first half of this fight, maybe the first 2 rounds with the grappling. But I do feel like Denise Gomes, the later that it gets into this fight, she's still going to carry that power. She's still going to have the edge on the feet, and the takedowns are going to come a little bit harder. So maybe it's a live bet spot on Denise Gomes if I see it heading south. But I think pre-fight I do slightly edge Eduardo Moura. Just no way I'd be betting her, truth be told, man. Marcos versus Castaneda. Big fan of Daniel Marcos here, man, at 135. It's one of the closest line fights on the card. And I've seen a lot of love for, a lot of action come in on John Castaneda, and it's typically you would see the undefeated 15-0 guy getting some steam, but that's not the case this week. Man, if the fight plays out on the feet, I think Daniel Marcos is really sharp. I think he's a really intelligent striker. While the volume might not always be there. I think he does a really good job of managing distance. He has really good leg kicks, teep kicks. He's got a really, really sharp jab. And I feel like if John Castaneda gets stuck out at range with him here in the big cage, that does favor Daniel Marcos quite heavily. What I do think John Castaneda's live to do, though, is mix in some of the wrestling. I feel like he could get inside, land a couple takedowns, and really make this fight close. And that's kind of an area that I haven't seen Daniel Marcos tested in enough yet to want to back him. So I'm a little bit worried about the takedowns for John Castaneda, but I kind of feel like I'm on the Daniel Marcos side this week, and that's who I'm going to side with, man. I feel like Daniel Marcos is going to just get a clean decision win on the outside, piecing up Castaneda with the jab and things.
Yeah, so I think that there'll be a time to fade Daniel Marcos. I've tried in his last 2 fights, and I do think that it's coming. I'm just not sure if it's John Castaneda here. Truth be told, I think money line wise, whoever's at plus money is probably the value side. But you look at the props for this fight, and either guy to win by decision is plus 185. And I would probably lean Daniel Marcos by decision plus 185. I think that he's going to make this close. John Castaneda, a guy notoriously willing to take some shots, to give some. And both these guys super durable. I just think that Marcos is going to have a little bit cleaner striking, maybe just land the more significant shots over the course of a round. Even if Castaneda is going to mix in some wrestling, I'm not sure that it's going to win over the judges, especially recently. So I do expect Marcos to edge this out, probably make him 16-0 and completely overpriced in his next fight. And that's when I'm going to look to kind of target that. But for now, probably Marcos by decision plus 185 would be the play for me. Moving down to the women's flyweight division, Andrea KGB Lee taking on Montana De La Rosa. Both these girls kind of journey women in the UFC. It just seems like they're never going to break that, top 10. And when I just think of both of these girls and how their careers played out, I do think that Andrea Lee is the more well-rounded of the two. I think that she's a whole lot more dangerous on the feet, has a little bit cleaner striking than Montana De La Rosa. De La Rosa, if she's on it, she has pretty good wrestling. I'm not sure that she's going to be able to use that more than a couple of times this fight against Andrea Lee. Andrea Lee does a pretty good job of adjusting her game plan mid-fight, and she has some wrestling of her own where if De La Rosa gets sloppy, she could wind up on top, and Andrea Lee's good at maintaining that top control. They have a similar amount of fights, but I still think that Lee's got more experience at a higher level, and I liken her. I think minus 150 is probably warranted. Probably no meat left on the bone, and it'll likely go to decision. So a no bet for me, but rightful favorite for Andrea Lee.
Similar thoughts here, man. I like Andrea Lee to win. I like her to win by decision. Have that written down at plus 125. I don't know. When I watched the fight back from the first time they fought, Montana does land 5 takedowns in that fight, which is a good number of takedowns you think would win you a fight, but there's little to no control in any of her takedowns. And any time that it was on the feet, it's clear as day who the better striker is here. Andrea Lee doubling her up in volume. Andrea Lee's getting up there in age a little bit, but I don't think it's too much of a concern here in this matchup. I think she's a lot more physical as well than Montana is, and I feel like that's the reason how she, why she didn't get stuck on bottom the first time and why she's not going to get stuck on bottom again here. And just like the first time, anytime the fight's played out on feet, like what the judges favor more, and I feel like that heavily favors Andrea Lee. So I think around 60%, like you said, is pretty accurate. But for a fight that's like minus 400 to see the distance, seeing plus money on her decision line is a little bit tempting to me. Brad Katona taking on Jesse Butler at bantamweight. This is a price tag that you never really want to see on a guy like Brad Katona because he's not the biggest guy. He's not the most dangerous guy, but he's a pretty smart fighter. He's got really high fight IQ. He's really good cardio. And, Jesse Butler, just truth be told, man, the guy seems less than impressive. I know last time out when he got knocked out early by Jim Miller, that was at 55, and this fight Saturday is at bantamweight, so really curious to see him on the scale in the morning. I haven't really put too much thought or tape into this fight just because I would never lay this price tag on Katona. Not really interested on the dog shot on Jesse Butler, but you can get doesn't go the distance at plus 170. And when you have a minus 700 fighter, I feel like that's plus EV in the long run, So I feel like Katona's live to maybe lock up a sub in 2 or 3, but Brad Katona decision is typically how things happen. I'm going to side Brad Katona. No action on this one so far for me, though.
Yeah, if Butler had one submission loss, I would be super tempted to play Katona by submission. I think they're hanging a plus 510 out. That would be the number for me. Like that 500 mark seems plenty fair, but he hasn't been submitted, and Katona's definitely been kind of a letdown so far. I know that this is a second stint in the UFC, but you'd think guys like Garrett Armfield would be a winnable fight for somebody with the experience that Katona has, but it wasn't. So this is obviously hey, look, if he wins the Ultimate Fighter twice, he's got to win a couple of times in the UFC. Let's give him Jesse Butler type fight. So yeah, I expect him to get a win inside the distance here. This is the only fight in the UFC he'll probably get where it is, this is his chance, to actually get the finish here. So I'm hoping that he does. I think he needs it for his career and to get back into the, good graces of the UFC. I think it would look good for his career moving forward if he could go out here and really showcase his skill set against an easy challenger in Jesse Butler. So yeah, Katona's the pick, inside the distance, submission prop, but might end up laying off entirely. Moving up to the welterweight division, Charles Radtke taking on Carlos Prates. I've got a bet on Radtke here, man. I think that this is a close fight, but I told you earlier in the week, I think fading the foreigner in America against an American is a pretty solid strategy. We've seen this on a couple of the fight nights where they bring in dudes from across the world to fight in Louisville, Tennessee, of all places. And I feel like this is
Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Louisville, Kentucky. My bad. And I feel like this is Radtke's fight to lose. They're trying to showcase somebody in Radtke who has a ton of finishing upside. I think that he's a little bit more well-rounded. Prates, primarily a Muay Thai striker. I think that he's a little bit one-dimensional, and I expect Radtke to kind of be able to get in there, land the harder shots, and then mix in the takedowns whenever he needs to. Don't really have a super deep breakdown, but I do think that he's going to be able to edge this out and maybe get a pretty nasty finish as well.
So I'm a bit worried about Charles Radtke on the feet. I really am. I think although he's listed a little bit shorter than I think he's taller than what he's listed, because I remember thinking Gilbert Urbino was going to have a massive size advantage over him, and it really wasn't that pronounced. So I feel like when they square off, people might see that Charles really isn't as small as they have him listed, but I do think he's going to have to eat some shots to close range here. I know Trevin Giles is not a good look to be up 2-0 on you in Carlos's debut, but it is the guy's debut. There's a little bit of octagon jitters and things at the time. Carlos Prates just shows that he kind of has that death touch. Like when he lets that sniping straight left go, it's powerful, man. He's got a nice little head kick as well that I feel like someone like Chuck Buffalo's just, I don't know, man. I feel like Chuck Buffalo's the type to just kind of get in there, be mean, but not technical enough and eat one of these head kicks. So I feel like Carlos Prates is going to have an advantage on the feet, and Charles is going to have to eat some damage to close range. But I do feel like he has takedown upside, and I feel like if he wants to win this fight, it is the best route to victory is to take this guy down. This guy's been submitted numerous times. Radtke has a couple submissions on his record. You see him rack up that control time in the Blood Diamond fight. And so they were hanging plus 900 out there on all the books on Radtke's submission. And so I took just a small shot on that just because he is a guy that'll fight for your money. I'm pretty sure he trains with Bilal a little bit as well, who's pretty intelligent, hopefully telling him to go out there and take this guy down. And plus 900 was wide for what I felt like was one of his best path to victories there, man. So I'm hoping Charles Radtke cashes some tickets for us this weekend. Regardless, I do think that's one of the best fights on this card. We do move on to the prelim main event, Thiago Moises taking on Klein. My first money line shot of the week, I took the dog shot on Thiago Moises at like plus 108. I think there's big advantages in the grappling here, big advantages in the cardio, and I don't think that Moises is lost on the feet whatsoever here against Klein. Klein, I feel like he's improving lately. You know, he's like 4-0-1 in his last 5 fights. The win's just not really that great in my eyes. You know, Mason Jones, he's a tough fighter, but he's not that good. He's out of the UFC at this point. You know, guys like AJ Cunningham coming in on short notice. I do feel like at some point Thiago Moises is going to get this fight down, and I feel like there is a big gap on the mat here. So I took a dog shot on Thiago Moises. I've looked at Moises sub 2 plus 1,300, sub 3 plus 1,600. I think those are some wide lines, and that's how I see this fight going, man. I think Thiago Moises should probably be about minus 120, minus 130 in this fight. So first money line dog shot of the night on Thiago Moises.
I like it. I like the Moises by submission plus 390. Not really sure where it's going to happen, but, I do think he's pretty outmatched on the feet. It'd be in his best interest to get this fight to the mat as soon as possible. Klein, I guess I'm with you. He's kind of making improvements, but it seems like the competition level has been favorable. This is finally an opportunity for him to kind of prove something big here against a name like Thiago Moises. But there is obviously a hole in his game. And I just feel like if it stays on the feet, we're going to see a Klein decision win. And if Moises is able to get his game going, I don't see Klein being able to hold off a black belt like Moises for 15 minutes. So I think that Moises will end up finding that sub. Plus 390 submission is probably where I'm looking to play this one if I do play it.
Another thing I just failed to mention is when I see the guys who have beaten Thiago Moises, it's Beneil Dairouche, Islam Makhachev, Benoit Saint Denis, Damir Usmagulov when he was first on his run, Joel Alvarez. Like, these are guys that I are highly favored in a fight with Klein. And arguably, I don't want to sound rude to Klein, but it would be Thiago's probably worst loss in the UFC if he loses this fight. So I was happy at plus money. I felt like he was the clear side for me.
Yeah. Let's see. Moving up to the welterweight division, first fight of the main card, Punahele Soriano taking on Miguel Baeza. This one seems to be a pretty highly debated one on Twitter this week. We talked about this one a little bit. I kind of liken Miguel Baeza to Phil Hawes in the fact that in the majority of his matchups, he's got a more well-rounded skill set, probably edges out his opponent in every aspect of MMA, except his chin lets him down. And I feel like the UFC is, in a weird way, kind of setting him up for that to happen again here against Punahele Soriano, who has had difficulty in the past with wrestlers. It seems like wrestlers are the type of guys who can expose him. And I looked over Baeza's stats, and I don't even think he's ever shot over 2 takedowns, much less landed both of them. So I do think that this is a favorable matchup for Soriano, and the fact that he's not going to have to continuously try and defend takedowns. But if he doesn't push the pace, he could certainly get outclassed by Baeza. I think that Baeza has a little bit cleaner striking, and he could probably put together a 15-minute striking clinic if he wanted to. But it's on Punahele Soriano to push the pace without this wrestling threat. If he has the harder shots, we've seen him land some pretty disgusting blows, and we know he has the type of power. He's just been on a pretty tough run, going 1-4 in his last 5. The line kind of, I don't know. We're seeing like plus 165 right now. His TKO's plus 290, and honestly, I feel like that's a ton of his win conditions.
Yeah.
I'm looking at his last 3 wins all come by KO, and I think that's how you've got to play him here in this kind of like do or die fight. He probably gets cut if he doesn't win, so I got to think back against the wall, he's willing to let it go. Give me Punahele TKO plus 290.
Yeah, I love to hear it, man. I am on Puna this week. That's my second money line bet that I've got. And it sucks because I did bet him at plus 150, and now there is plus 165s out there. And truth be told, I think plus 290 is even a better bet than betting the money line, because if it goes to decision, I don't know how often he wins that. I actually do think that Puna has better offensive wrestling than Miguel Baeza, and it might wind up on top here, just truth be told. But I felt like if you asked me if it went to decision, who I thought would win that fight a little bit more, it could be Miguel Baeza. I think you're right when you say a majority of Puna's finish condition or winning condition is by knockout. So plus 290, I think, is an incredible bet. With Baeza, pretty decent striker out at range. I think he has really good calf kicks, and that could be something to cause Puna some trouble because he has that kind of wide, heavy boxing stance. But yeah, man, when you see a layoff of 2 years, the chin issues that he's had, to be playing minus 190, minus 200s on him, I think the value is clearly gone on Miguel Baeza there. And when I look at Puna, I don't really fault him for losses to Brendan Allen, to Kopylov. The Stoltzfus loss was a pretty bad loss, and I feel like this is just kind of that opportunity to buy low on Punahele and bringing Miguel back to give him, like you said, a stand-up fight where if he lands his left hand, the guy's likely going to sleep. So Punahele Soriano, I actually have him in my fantasy league. I was hoping he'd be the favorite. Quite shocked that he wasn't. But hell, I see him getting the finish here on Saturday, so happy to have him. We do kick off our main card with Julian Marquez taking on Zach Reese. Julian Marquez becoming a bit mushy this week, man. He's up to like minus 130s, I think, in some areas. And, of course, a lot of people are deserving of a favorite price tag against a guy and improving like Zach Reese. But Marquez is going to be undersized here, man. The guy has not won a fight in over 3 years, and that fight he won was Sam Alvey. The fight prior to that is Maki Pitolo, where he's losing every single second of the Maki fight and then gets the Hail Mary submission in round 3. He's been open about the horrible back and neck injuries. It's, I just don't get a ton of the love for Julian Marquez this week because I've never really thought that he was that complete of a fighter. What I think people see is, MAB, RoboCop. Those are the last couple guys who have beaten him, and there's no way Zach Reese on that level. He's out here getting dropped on his head by Cody Brundage. Not a good look, but man, I just feel like Julian Marquez is not somebody that I am eager to play in a spot like this. What I do think is a little bit tempting is to fade Zach Reese in rounds 2 or 3 because Marquez has that dog in him. Marquez is not going to quit on himself. And Zach Reese, I don't think's even seen like the 6th or 7th minute of a fight. So I think if it gets to 2 and 3, Marquez is plus 550, plus 1,100 in those rounds. I think that kind of be the way that I look to attack this fight because I do think Zach Reese is a pretty dangerous guy early on.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree with most everything you said. I'm attacking it a little bit differently, though. I look at Zach Reese, and I do think that he's just similar to Terrence McKinney in the fact that he's just not going to get out of the first round. He's a do-or-die type of fighter, and I can appreciate that style. If he doesn't get his game going early, he'll fold. I mean, we didn't really see that in the Cody Brundage fight. He just got put out, but I think that was where the fight was going after that point. And I do expect him to kind of sell out here against Marquez, who, like you said, him being on the layoff for over a year, coming off of 2 finishing losses, I don't think that Zach Reese is going to give him any time to get that ring rust off or time to adjust whatsoever. So fight ends in round 1 at plus 100, I think is completely fair. They're saying it happens 50% of the time, but it happens in 100% of Zach Reese's fights. And, you look at Marquez's record, it happens in a good portion of his fights as well. So fight ends in round 1, even money. That's probably how I'm looking to play this fight. Let's see. Staying in the same weight class, Bruno Ferreira taking on Dustin Stoltzfus. I'm not like incredibly high on Bruno Ferreira, but he is like a terrifying dude to fight, you know? I mean, he punches extremely hard. He's small for the division, but he makes up for it in just, you know, the thickness of him. He's just huge. They call him the Hulk. They call him the Hulk for a reason, dude. He willing to he's super athletic, willing to wing some punches, and I think that he's a problem for a lot of people. His only loss being to Nursultan Ruzaboyev, who after watching him in St. Louis against Joaquin Buckley, like that dude's huge. He is massive, and I think that he'll be a tough test for a lot of people. It just, you know, good matchup against Bruno Ferreira. Dustin Stoltzfus, he's a decent size, but he's kind of struggled his whole career to get anything consistent. This does seem to be like a winnable fight for him. The kind of guys that he loses to are somewhat specialists, and Gerald Mearshart and Rodolfo Vieira. And I don't know. I think that this is a setup fight for Bruno Ferreira. I'll probably be picking him. I think he'll win by KO. But Dustin Stoltzfus, a veteran, I wouldn't be surprised if he pulled something out. But this isn't a fight that I'm super motivated to bet, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I did bet the under 2.5 here in a parlay because more likely than not, I think Bruno puts him out in the first round by TKO. But I feel like if Dustin is getting out of the first round, I think he's actually has a really good chance to submit Bruno Ferreira. I feel like the cardio advantage is there for Dustin, the grappling upside's there for him, submission upside. But I think he's got to get out of round one for that to happen. And like you said, Bruno's just like, call him the Hulk. He's just like a little bulldog, man. You know, he's just thick, compact. He's very fast for the division. And when he lands on people, they go to sleep. And I just think that's what's more likely to happen here. It's first round knockouts like plus 175. I think I bet it at plus 250 against Phil Halls. So I was hoping to get a little bit better number again here. Because I think all of his knockouts are in the first round. Maybe one of them's been in the second round, but he's a pretty front-loaded fighter or bust. So if you're trying to find action on Bruno, I don't think the money line's where it's at. I think you got to attack early finish props, but the later this guy is in the fight, I think Dustin Stoltzfus becomes a little bit live to submit him. Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Ricky Turcios. Rebooked fight from a couple months ago where, truth be told, I think the nerves got the best of Raul Rosas before walkout. You know, it was like a super last-minute cancellation. And I was kind of big on him last time and was sort of happy to get the ticket back as the fight was getting closer. You know, I thought maybe laying the big chalk on him wasn't the right move. But I do think that he's way more physical than Ricky Turcios is. I'm not sold on the takedown defense of Turcios. He's definitely not dangerous and shouldn't deter Rosas from coming forward at all. And I feel like Raul Rosas is going to get these takedowns, and especially early in the fight, there's a chance that he's just too physical, gets to a dominant position. So I like Raul Rosas by submission. I'm not going to have any action on it this time, but I feel like he submits him probably in the first 7.5 minutes of this fight.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I don't know why you feel that way, and you're not wanting to get on that. I'm probably going to end up playing Raul Rosas Jr. round one sub plus 500. I think that happens a lot. Like, can't you just see Ricky Turcios getting his back taken, getting choked out, and then him just like smiling afterwards? You know, like, like I could just totally see him just. I don't know. The way that he loses, his mentality for fighting just isn't there, you know? Seems like a chill enough dude, but I do think that he's bound to get caught up, especially early when Raul Rosas has gas. And like you said, like Ricky Turcios, similar to like Tony Ferguson, he isn't the most physical fighter, but he's a good scrambler. He can take a lot of damage, and he makes you work. And so, if Raul doesn't get that early finish, it could be a pretty close fight. But, that first 5 minutes, I think Ricky's going to be into some trouble. He's probably going to be put in some bad positions. And because I don't think that his mindset is where it needs to be, I could certainly see him getting caught off guard in that first round and Raul getting that finish. So I'll probably end up finding a way to play that, even if it's just for half a unit.
I like it.
Yeah. Moving up to the co-main event in the light heavyweight division, Dominick Reyes taking on Dustin Jacoby. I don't know who they're really trying to set up. Like this is an odd fight to make. Like, when do you have a co-main eventer coming in that's 0-4 in his last few fights, and then Dustin Jacoby on the flip side's 1-3 in his last 4 fights? Like, it's a tough co-main event to sell. But I guess Reyes has kind of continued to carry a name for himself after the close fight with John Jones, but it's been pretty James Vick-esque on his downward spiral of the UFC, and I feel like he's bound to have a pretty rough night against Dustin Jacoby, who I think is one of the better kickboxers in the UFC. Dustin Jacoby also has some chin problems himself, so Reyes being as fast and athletic as he is, he's certainly live to catch him. But I think as this fight moves forward in the 15 minutes, that Dustin Jacoby has a little bit cleaner striking, and that'll end up starting to catch him as the fight moves on. Maybe starts wearing out that lead leg. I'm taking Dustin Jacoby here, and I do think that he'll find the chin of Reyes, and it'll be a really sad night for Dominick Reyes.
I really don't know what to think about the fight, man. This is one that I really don't have the best read on. Dominick Reyes has kind of held on to that loss to John Jones being so close and let it affect the rest of his career. It seems like he's never really been focused on the fight in front of him, and it's cost him, like you said, getting TKO'd in 3 in a row, something like that, 4 in a row now. And bad too, not just your everyday TKO, getting absolutely slept. I do think the guys that are finishing him are of higher level than Dustin Jacoby. I do think they hit a lot harder than Dustin Jacoby. He's one of these guys who I think prefers the volume more than he does committing to his shots. He's happy to pick apart on the outside with his leg kicks. And I feel like boxing on the inside, Dominick Reyes might be the better, cleaner striker on the inside. But I feel like at range, Dustin's just really good at racking up that volume and making the fight his. I personally, not so much on the money line, but especially in the total, I think there's a lot of Dom's durability issues baked into the total being where it is. I think the fight is kind of live to go over 2.5 rounds here. Dustin Jacoby, like I said, has never been one of these guys who's super committed to sitting down on his right hand at times and things. And if Dom, surely to God, is a little bit more worried about his chin issues, probably going to be a little bit hesitant with the time and the layoff. I wouldn't be shocked if the fight did slip over 2.5, but I do think when you see the durability concerns for Dominick Reyes and even Dustin Jacoby, sometimes, he can be winning fights and get caught and lose the round. I think you're just playing with fire if you're betting the over 2.5. It's not the smartest bet, even though I could see it happening. So I'm going to go Dustin Jacoby. I'm just not too clear on if this is going to be a decision or if he will be the next person to finish Reyes. But if Reyes is finished here, man, he's got to hang it up. He's got to call it quits, in my opinion. Now to our main event at 185, Jared Cannonier taking on Nassourdine Imavov. I don't think there's much meat on the bones left for either guy in terms of value, man. I think the line is pretty damn accurate, if I'm being honest with you. We see these middleweight fights go the decision all the time. They're always played super close. But you do see the younger fighter who's a little bit more versatile as a slight favorite here, and that does make sense to me here. You throw in the fact that Jared's 40 years old, coming off the MCL tear. I think Nassourdine is deserving of about a -120, -120 25 price tag. But Jared Cannonier's a pretty proven guy over 5 rounds. Pretty reliable gas tank, super durable, pretty athletic. The guy's just a pretty solid fighter all around. I just feel like at range, Imavov is really good at racking up his volume. Really good kicks, man. I feel like he's live to land a couple of takedowns. I think he's one of the brighter prospects in the division. Still under 30 years old. I feel like he's going to be around for a long time. And especially early on in this fight, I think he's going to get up at least the first 2 or 3 rounds. I'm not so sure about the championship rounds and his cardio. I do favor Jared there a little bit more just because he's a bit proven more in that spot. But Nassourdine Imavov by decision is how I think this fight happens at a pretty decent clip, man. Thoughts on it?
Yeah, if Cannonier was coming off of his Marvin Vettori victory and hadn't injured himself, I think that this would be a clear spot for Jared Cannonier. I think he's more proven over 5 rounds. And look at Nassourdine Imavov, and I've kind of seen him slow down a couple of times in his career. And that's just not something that I've seen from Jared Cannonier. You look at Cannonier's last 2 fights, and in the 5th round, he's putting up 80 strikes in both of them. And I don't think that that's something that Nassourdine Imavov has in him. I'm kind of looking towards Cannonier by KO rounds 4 and 5. I think that both of those are super live. So, yeah, Cannonier is probably the pick for me. I don't think that I'm going to have a money line play on it. But if I do have anything, it'll probably be a couple of stabs, something like that, especially if it's at a crazy number. But not saying any of that with a ton of conviction. So probably a layoff fight for me. Cannonier's the slight pick, though. Obviously, the age and an injury is a little suspect, but I do think that he's the more proven guy, and I'm not really convinced that Imavov is the future of the 185 division.
I like it. Hope it's some good fights, man. A lot of fights for you guys to watch this weekend. And like we talked about before, man, I think there's 7, 8 pretty solid fights that I would love to see in person on this card. So happy you guys are getting to attend it. Hope the fights produce. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hope you appreciate some of the breakdowns. We'll be releasing some more bets this week. So as always, make sure to like, subscribe, pay attention to the Twitter, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.